The receipt was still warm from the printer. I read it like it might change if I looked away.
You bought this here, right?
$5,000, paid in full. Transaction approved. He folded it once, placed it carefully inside the shopping bag, and stood on the sidewalk for a moment doing nothing at all except breathing. 8 months, that was how long it had taken. 8 months of Saturday mornings when his friends were sleeping and he was stocking cereal boxes at Kroger. 8 months of packed lunches instead of cafeteria food, of skipping movies, of watching his savings account climb by $30, $40, sometimes $60 a week. Never fast enough and always moving. 8 months of his mother asking, "Are you sure you still want those shoes?" and him saying, "Yes, ma'am," every single time without hesitation because he was. The deal had been his father's idea. Carlos Ortega was a man who believed that things worth having should cost you something, not money necessarily, but effort, patience, proof of character. So he had sat Joshua down at the kitchen table at the start of senior year and laid it out simply. Maintain your grades, keep your job, save what you can, and we'll cover the rest. Your 18th birthday, a gift from all three of us. Joshua had shaken his father's hand like they were signing a contract. He'd kept every term. The sneakers were inside the bag now, wrapped in tissue paper inside their original box, which still smelled faintly of whatever they use in factories to make new things smell new. Limited edition. A collaboration between a designer Joshua had followed for 2 years and an athlete whose poster still hung on his bedroom wall. His size, a 9.5, had been the last pair in the store. Cordell, the employee who'd held them for him, had smiled when Joshua walked in and said, "I knew you'd show up." Joshua walked to the bus stop outside the boutique, sat down on the bench, and pulled out his phone. He took a photo of the bag, the white rope handles, the elegant lettering on the side, and sent it to his parents with a single line, "Got them. Thank you." His mother replied in 4 seconds with 3 crying emojis and a heart. He was still smiling at his phone when he felt someone watching him. He didn't look up right away. The feeling was subtle, the particular weight of a gaze that isn't casual. He'd learned to recognize it the way you learn to recognize weather, not from a single sign, but from the way several small things feel wrong at once. When he finally glanced to his left, the woman on the bench was looking at the shopping bag. Not at him, at the bag. Her expression was unreadable, or almost. Joshua looked back at his phone. The smile was still there, but smaller now. The afternoon felt different. Jennifer Hayes told herself she wasn't a jealous person. She had repeated this often enough that she mostly believed it. At dinner parties, in therapy once 3 years ago, in the quiet arguments she had with herself during long commutes. She was practical. She was realistic. She understood that life wasn't fair and that some people had more than others, and that was simply the way of things. She had been inside Soul Haven Boutique for 11 minutes. That was how long it had taken for her to find the sneakers her son had been talking about for 2 months, turn them over in her hands, check the size, a perfect match, flip the tag, and feel the specific, stomach-dropping vertigo of a number that was completely, absolutely out of reach. $4,200. She had set the box down carefully, the way you set something down when you don't want anyone to see your hands shaking. She'd told the employee she was just browsing. She'd walked out without making eye contact with anyone. Now she was sitting at the bus stop with a headache pressing behind her left eye, waiting for a ride she'd scheduled 20 minutes ago that still hadn't arrived. And watching a teenager walk out of the same store she'd just left carrying the bag she'd walked out of without. She told herself she was just noticing. She noticed his clothes, plain black t-shirt, dark jeans, sneakers that had clearly been worn for a long time. She noticed his backpack, the kind sold at discount stores in bulk. She noticed that he was young, 17 maybe, and that he was Latino, and she noticed the shopping bag, white with rope handles, the Soul Haven logo printed on the side in elegant silver. She told herself these were just observations, but the thought that formed wasn't an observation. It was a verdict, assembled in seconds from years of accumulated assumption, never examined, never questioned, never held up to the light long enough to see what it actually was. There's no way he bought that. She watched him sit down, pull out his phone, take a photo of the bag. She watched him smile at whatever response he got. And she felt something twist in her chest, Not quite guilt, not quite anger, something uglier than both, something she would never have named out loud in polite company. She pulled out her phone. She told herself she was doing the right thing, that someone needed to check, that if she was wrong, they'd figure that out quickly and no harm done. That it was actually the responsible thing, the civic thing, to report something that didn't look right. She moved slightly on the bench so Joshua wouldn't see the screen. She dialed. 911, what's your emergency? I'm witnessing a theft. Her voice came out steady, certain. There's a young Latino boy at the bus stop outside Soul Haven Boutique on Peachtree Road. He just walked out with stolen merchandise, expensive sneakers, thousands of dollars. You need to send someone before the bus comes. Did you see him steal the items? A half-second pause. The smallest hesitation. I know he stole them. There's no way he could afford them. Just send someone now. She lowered the phone and looked at the shopping bag. Across the bench, Joshua was still smiling at his phone, completely unaware. Officer Gary Taylor had a system. It wasn't written down anywhere. It wasn't something he'd been taught or trained or told was acceptable. It lived somewhere below language. In the part of the brain that processes a situation, in the time it takes to step out of a patrol car, the part that sorts people into categories before a single word is spoken. He pulled up to the bus stop at 2:17 p.m. He saw a Latino teenager on a bench with a shopping bag. The category was already assigned. Hey, his voice was loud enough to make Joshua's head snap up from his phone. Where'd you get those shoes? Joshua's first expression was confusion, genuine, unguarded, the confusion of someone whose mind is still on a photo he just sent his mother. He looked at the shopping bag, then back at the officer. I just bought them, sir. He reached into the bag immediately, no hesitation, no calculation. The receipt was right on top, still folded once, still warm. He held it out. Here's my receipt. Taylor didn't take it. He turned instead toward the sound of Jennifer Hayes rising from the bench, her voice carrying across the bus stop with the confidence of someone who had already decided how this would end. He couldn't afford those, he stole them. Those sneakers cost thousands of dollars. Taylor turned back to Joshua. The receipt was still extended. Joshua's arm hadn't moved. What happened next lasted approximately 4 seconds and would be replayed millions of times. Taylor looked at the receipt, looked at Jennifer, looked back at Joshua, and made a decision that had nothing to do with evidence and everything to do with the system he carried inside his chest. Hands behind your back. You're under arrest. What? Joshua's voice broke slightly on the word, not from guilt, but from the particular shock of being accused of something you haven't done when you're holding the proof in your hand. I didn't steal anything. I have my receipt right here. I just showed it to you. Hands behind your back. Just look at it, please. Call the store. They'll tell you. Taylor grabbed his arm and spun him around. Joshua tried to pull back, not to run, not to fight, just the involuntary resistance of a body that doesn't understand why it's being restrained. Taylor twisted his arms with practiced force, and Joshua made a sound he didn't mean to make, a sharp exhale of pain before the handcuffs clicked shut. The shopping bag hit the ground. Taylor kicked it to the side. The crowd at the bus stop went quiet in that specific way crowds go quiet when something wrong is happening, and everyone can see it, but nobody knows how to stop it. Phones came up slowly, one by one, recording. Joshua stood on the sidewalk in handcuffs, blinking fast. The receipt lay on the ground next to the bag. Cordell Lopez was clocking out. His shift had ended at 2:15, and he was thinking about the drive home, about whether he'd remembered to take the chicken out of the freezer, about how his feet hurt from standing all day on tile floors, the ordinary private thoughts of someone whose workday was over. He heard the raised voices through the glass. He walked to the window the way you walk toward something you don't want to see but already know you have to. He looked out. He saw the patrol car. He saw the crowd. He saw Joshua standing on the sidewalk with his hands behind his back and the shopping bag on the ground and the officer standing between them like a wall. He didn't clock out. He pushed through the door at a run. What the hell are you doing? He was still moving when he shouted it, closing the distance fast, voice loud enough that Taylor turned before Cordell reached them. That boy didn't steal anything. I sold him those shoes less than half an hour ago. He has his receipt. Did you even check it? Taylor's expression shifted, not to doubt, but to a different kind of certainty, the certainty of someone who had been interrupted. Mind your business. This is a police matter. Step back. It is my business. Cordell stopped 2 feet from Taylor, breathing hard from the run, not from fear. I work in that store. I processed his payment. He paid with a debit card. Transaction went through. I printed that receipt myself. Everything was legitimate. He pulled out his phone and raised it, camera facing Taylor. You have no legal reason to arrest him. I'm telling you, as the employee who made the sale, he didn't steal anything. Taylor stepped toward him. The crowd tightened, phone still up. Put that phone down. Leave or you're getting arrested too. Cordell didn't lower the phone. What Taylor did next was the moment that ended his career, though he didn't know it yet. He grabbed Cordell by the collar, pulled him close, reached out with his other hand and took the phone. His thumb moved across the screen with the practiced certainty of someone who had done this before, or at least imagined doing it. He found the video. He deleted it. He shoved the phone back into Cordell's chest hard enough to make him stumble. The crowd exhaled collectively. Cordell caught his balance. His voice, when it came, was very quiet. You have no idea who owns this store. Taylor's posture shifted, almost imperceptibly, but Cordell caught it. Michael Barnes. You know that name? Inside Joshua's chest, something had gone very still. He'd stopped trying to explain. He'd stopped trying to show anyone anything. He was standing in handcuffs on a public sidewalk 3 days before his 18th birthday, his shopping bag on the ground, and he was thinking clearly, precisely. The way you think when the shock has passed, and only the reality remains that he had done everything right. Every single thing, and it hadn't mattered at all. Michael Barnes watched the video 4 times. He sat at his desk in the office above his flagship store with the monitor brightness turned up in the room otherwise dark, and he watched. The interior footage first, Joshua walking in, Cordell greeting him, the sneakers coming out of the box, the transaction processed, the receipt printed, the handshake. Clean, documented, irrefutable. Then the exterior footage, Taylor arriving. The receipt extended, visible even on the camera's resolution, white paper held out in a teenager's hand. Taylor turning away from it to listen to a woman on a bench. The handcuffs, the bag kicked across the concrete, Cordell running out, the phone grabbed, the deletion, the shove. The 4th time Barnes watched, he paused it at the moment Taylor looked at the receipt and turned away. He sat with that image for a long time. He had been 17 once. In a different city, a different decade, but the same country. He had been followed in stores, questioned on sidewalks, spoken to in a tone that assumed guilt before he'd opened his mouth. He had promised himself, at 22, when he'd made his first real money, at 28, when he'd opened his first store, at 35, when he'd won his second lawsuit against a police department, that he would use every resource he built to make sure that promise meant something. He picked up the phone and called David Chen. David, I'm sending you footage, federal lawsuit, false arrest, racial profiling, false police report. The full package, Chen called back 19 minutes later. This is as clean as it gets. The officer made 0 attempt to verify. The caller had no evidence, just assumption. We go after both. Do it, and I want to meet the family. The next morning, Joshua sat across from Michael Barnes in a leather chair that probably cost more than a month of his Kroger paychecks. His parents were on either side of him. His mother had her hand on his arm. His father was very still in the way that men get still when they're holding something in. Barnes looked at Joshua directly, the way adults rarely look at teenagers, as an equal, as someone whose experience deserved to be taken seriously. What happened to you was wrong. You worked for something, you earned it, and you were treated like a criminal for it. Joshua nodded. He'd been nodding a lot in the past 24 hours, at police reports, at his parents' questions, at the school counselor his mother had called. Nodding because speaking required him to go back inside the moment, and the moment still had handcuffs in it. I just wanted to buy shoes, he said. His voice came out smaller than he intended. Barnes leaned forward slightly. I know, and every person in that courtroom is going to know it too. 3 months later, a jury watched the footage. They heard Jennifer's 911 call played in full, her voice clear and certain. I know he stole them. There's no way he could afford them. And they watched the exterior camera show Joshua extending a receipt that an officer refused to take. They returned a verdict in 4 hours. Jennifer Hayes, $280,000 in damages. Officer Gary Taylor terminated. The shopping bag was entered into evidence. The receipt, folded once, still crisp, was Exhibit A. Joshua kept the receipt. Not in a frame, not displayed anywhere, just folded in the back of his wallet, worn soft at the creases from 2 years of being carried. He couldn't have explained exactly why, except that it felt important to keep the proof close. Not because he needed to prove anything to anyone anymore, but because it reminded him of something he never wanted to forget, that he had been right, and that being right wasn't always enough. And that sometimes you needed other people, a store employee who ran out without clocking out, a businessman who'd kept a promise to his younger self, a jury that watched a video and chose correctly to make right mean something. He started college in the fall, Georgia State Business Administration. A full ride from the settlement, which meant 4 years of studying without the particular low-grade anxiety of watching a tuition bill climb. He chose business because of Michael Barnes, not to become Barnes exactly, but because of what Barnes represented, the idea that resources built deliberately could be turned into protection for people who didn't yet have any. He gave his first talk at a high school in January of his freshman year. He stood at the front of an auditorium of juniors and seniors, some bored, some on their phones. Some watching him the way you watch someone whose story you've already heard, but whose face makes it real. And he told them what happened at the bus stop. He told them about the receipt. He told them about Cordell. He told them about standing in handcuffs on a sidewalk 3 days before his 18th birthday, blinking fast so he wouldn't cry in front of strangers. He told them what he wished someone had told him before that afternoon. Know your rights, keep your receipts, and if something happens to you that is wrong, say so, loudly. To everyone who will listen, because silence doesn't protect you, evidence does. A girl in the 3rd row raised her hand. Were you scared? Joshua thought about it honestly. Yes, he said. But I was also right, and I kept the proof. Jennifer Hayes moved out of state 8 months after the verdict. Her savings were gone. Her house was gone. Her name, attached permanently to court documents and viral videos that the internet had no interest in forgetting, followed her anyway. Officer Gary Taylor applied to 7 police departments. Every background check said the same thing. He works warehouse nights now, in a building without windows in a city that doesn't know his name. Cordell Lopez was promoted to store manager at Soul Haven. He still works the floor sometimes on Saturdays because he prefers it. The Atlanta Police Department adopted new verification protocols, mandatory bias training, and a civilian oversight committee. Racially disproportionate stops in Buckhead dropped 63% over 3 years. The sneakers are in Joshua's dorm room, still in the box, still in the bag. He's saving them for something. He hasn't decided what yet. Maybe graduation, maybe his first day running his own business, maybe just a day when the world feels like it's earned them. But he'll know when. He always did.